Hey, it takes a family. Wow. So happy Tuesday. I know that this is an interesting time in our lives as we're all doing a shelter in place. Maybe some of us more than others. Texas just different cities are doing a shelter in place. But I know that it's not happening everywhere, but I believe that it looks like it's about to be, and people are staying home. And I know that for some people, I've been enjoying watching a lot of videos of families having a great time at home. I think this is a great opportunity to show that it does take a family to get through this. I think it's amazing. Just in my own neighborhood, I've seen parents who are really engaged with their kids. Now, I'm not saying that parents in my neighborhood are not usually engaged, but actually our neighborhood is really active. People are always walking and cycling. But to be honest, I usually see the adults doing it and the kids maybe are together and they're going to the pool. But now I'm watching parents walking down the sidewalk with their kids, dangling toddlers, in the air and laughing and having fun and making the best of the situation. And I know that as parents, somewhere in your heart, even though you're enjoying your time with your kids, you're probably scared. And so I don't want to dismiss the fact that a lot of us are afraid. I believe in, hey, we mourn with those who mourn, we rejoice with those who rejoice. I believe that we should do that. And, but I'm going to meet you there, but I don't want to leave you there, because that's not what God does. So God meets us where we're at, but He doesn't leave us there. So I want you to know that just as God is not afraid of your fear, He's not upset that you have a bit of fear, but He wants to meet you where you're at. And He doesn't want to leave you there. He wants you to move on from that. And for those of you who are at home with family, you're truly blessed. I'm telling you that you are truly blessed. And so I really, whatever difficulties you may be having in your family or in your marriage, it's one of those times that this is an amazing opportunity for us to lay things down to God and to try to move past a lot of that. And it's not going to be easy for everyone. And many people are doing great, but as some of you may know, I was a single mom for 9 years. So I know there's a lot of single parents out there who might be feeling lonely with their kids, or maybe you are making the best of it. I know when I was a single mom and going through some tough times, I enjoyed every minute with my son. I mean, okay, no, not to perfection. I mean, of course, there were times where we get frustrated. There were times, honestly, I'm going to be honest here, that there were periods of time where I was worried about money. I was worried about where, if the prices of gas increase, will I be able to afford it? Because I was on such a strict budget. And so many families, especially single families, are thinking that right now too. And there were times where I would do everything I could for my son. We'd do homework, we'd watch a bit of TV, we'd play, I'd always read to him before he went to bed. He had a death grip on me and I'd have to pull away. But I'd always wait till he fell asleep and then I'd leave. I probably spoiled him that way. But I remember there was a time where when I would go to bed, that was my time, and I would have a panic attack every night for a while, and I had to actually quit drinking coffee and have no sugar to help, with at least what I was taking in to help calm me down. So some of you might be experiencing that, and I don't want you to be upset with yourself for experiencing that, but it is time to start finding ways to find some peace and some calmness during this time. And I'm not going to force you into that, but I am going to pray for you. And if you want me to pray for you specifically, then you can private message me, and I would be happy to pray for you and any of your needs. I actually just bought a prayer journal, and because I have so many notebooks and Post-its that they just kind of get lost everywhere. So I decided I need a journal for prayer. I need a journal. I need an agenda. I need different things like that. So anyway, my point is, please private message me with your prayer requests, because I would be happy to share them. And I'm part of an awesome church of people who love to pray. And if you don't mind, I'll just share your first name and your need, and people will be praying for you in Texas. So anyway, I do want to also share a scripture that really helped me as a single mother. And I know I refer back to that a lot. And here's the reason why. I am married now. It was a very difficult time in my life. So whether you're a single parent or not, when we face trials and difficult times in our life, we become more dependent on our coping mechanisms. And some of those coping mechanisms are positive and good, and some of them are not. For some people, it's just walking outside, hearing the birds, feeling the breeze. I believe that actually helps lots of people. So if you can do that, even if it's just to open your front door and take a little breath, or open a window, do what you need to do. But also scripture helps a lot. And I want to read to you a scripture that really helped me during the difficult times I had as a single mom, solely depending on myself and God, because I didn't have anyone else to depend on. So I'm not going to read all of it to you, but some of the highlights. But Isaiah 54 is a powerful chapter in Isaiah. And as the years have gone by, I have met other single parents who have said that they also read Isaiah 54. So I think it's a great one for single parents. And one of them, one of the things he does is in verses 5, he says, "For your maker is your husband, the Lord Almighty is his name, the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth." And I love that, because he really is establishing himself as, I am your husband, which means he's your provider. He is someone who sacrifices for you. The Lord Almighty is his name. So he establishes his name. He wants you to know his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. I mean, he's just letting you know who he is. He's your Redeemer, and he's the God of all the earth. And it just really establishes him as that omniscient, omnipotent God that you can completely trust. And then he says, "The Lord will call you back as if you were a wife deserted and distressed in spirit, a wife who married young, only to be rejected, says your God." And I love that, because he says, in everlasting kindness, I will have compassion on you. So if for some reason you're alone at home today, I want you to cleave on to this message, because you're not really alone, and you may have to just call on him to be there with you. I know what it's like to be alone too, so I'm praying for you, okay? And I'm rejoicing with you too, because it's not always, I'm going to mourn with you, but I'm also going to rejoice with you, okay? Now, here's the other part that I really like, is that he tells us, starting in verses 11, he starts saying, listen, I know that you've been tossed to and fro. I know that you have been attacked, but I am going to establish you. Okay, so he starts to tell us how he's going to establish us. And then he says, in righteousness you will be established. Tyranny will be far from you. You will have nothing to fear. Terror will be far removed. It will not come near you. If anyone does attack you, it will not be my doing. Whoever attacks you will surrender to you. Amazing. And then he says, see, it is I who created the blacksmith, who fans the coals into flame and forges a weapon fit for its work. And it is I who have created the destroyer to wreak havoc. No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and this is their vindication from me, declares the Lord. So I just love this, because in a time of your life when you are feeling really vulnerable, this scripture just really establishes how powerful God is. He reminds you who He is. And He says, listen, I know that you are beat up, but I am here for you. And not only you, but for your future generations. And great will be your children's peace. So I really love that. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I hope it's helpful. Again, it's Isaiah 54. I was reading out of the NIV, but you can read it in any translation that you want, obviously. So in the news, we hear that both Ohio and Texas, I haven't heard of any other states, but both Ohio and Texas have said absolutely no elective surgeries because we need to conserve all of our, gloves and basically our medical resources and staff for caring for people during this time that we're afflicted with the coronavirus. And so both Ohio and Texas have said that specifically abortion is an elective surgery. And by the pro-choice movement, we know it is. It is a choice that people make. It is a choice that also ends the life of an innocent person. And they are aware of it. And so just wanted to mention to you which states are actually taking action on that. And I think that's really great to note that both Ohio and Texas have done that. And I believe consequences, ramifications for continuing to have the abortion clinics open, I believe they'll be faced with fines. But also know that this is putting a lot of women at risk because they're being exposed while they're at that clinic. These clinics are small. They're not big. Usually you are crammed in there. And if you were to go to Check My Clinic on the website, you'll also find that a lot of abortion clinics have been reported to have a lot of unsanitary conditions. So honestly, this is really not the time one, to conserve medical resources, and two, I truly am feeling, based on the data that is submitted to every county or city through Check My Clinic, when you read through it, they have highly unsanitary conditions. So this is really, abortion is not health care. It's not healthy for women, and certainly at this time it's not healthy. So that's something I just wanted y'all to know about. But let's also talk about some things, let's just give a little sex ed update. What's really interesting going on all over the nation, I think sometimes right now in Austin, we're having a kind of a bittersweet moment, because since the schools are closed, we're thinking, wow, it may mean that we're not going to have sex ed in Austin ISD, which is the controversial sex ed that was implemented or approved in October of 2019. At the same time, we also really hate what's happening to all of the families here because of this virus. So, but we are also still kind of grateful that the children aren't going to be exposed to this graphic education. And so I want to mention, some people are questioning the sex education in elementary school. Like, for example, in Austin ISD, the curriculum talks about how they're going to teach kids about their anatomy, and a lot of it is based on, they justify it as helping children to avoid sexual abuse if they know their anatomy. And when people read it, they're like, well, we don't see anything wrong with it. Some of the things that I see in it is really they're laying a foundation for the graphic sex education that they're going to be taught in 5th grade. I mean, it gets more and more graphic. And so, for example, the 3rd graders will learn the different parts of their body. So according to the lessons approved by the school board in October of 2019, 3rd graders, the lesson plan for teaching them about their reproductive parts is pretty graphic. So at this moment, if your kids are around, I want you to just pause and don't let your kids listen to this piece. So instead of just talking about private parts, which you are going to see in the, they have little pictures of little kids and they're wearing a bathing suit, and it's kind of what you and I probably remember. It's like anything under that bathing suit, no one should touch. But they do have in there that they're going to teach, that they have a vagina, that there's a vulva, that there's a clitoris, that there's an anus, that there's testicles. I mean, so they kind of now go into a lot of detail. They don't show pictures of a clitoris or a vulva or a vagina. They only show the little person with the bathing suit and basically saying all those parts are in there. By 4th and 5th grade, though, they are introducing kind of a cross-section of the body so that you can see the anus as well, which is not part of the reproductive system, obviously. But my point here is that in 3rd grade, there is absolutely nothing good or any kind of real blessing or health positive outcome to teach a little girl and a little boy about all of their parts, meaning the vulva, the clitoris. I'm not really, I don't have to say I'm not really sure. I'm confident that a 3rd grader does not need to know about their clitoris or their vulva. They also talk about the anus. Now, why are these things included? On one hand, you're going to say, well, Monica, they do have a clitoris and they do have a vulva, and they do have an anus, and it's close by. That's probably why they're talking about it. It's close to the other parts. I don't want you to be naive. SIECUS, Planned Parenthood, Amaze.org or Amaze Junior, all of those are really graphic. And what they believe is that children are sexual from birth. So if you believe that children are sexual from birth, then you're going to believe that they have, when they talk about that, they're talking about sexual rights. They're talking about that even children have the right to sexual pleasure, that we should not shame them if they discover themselves. But here we're seeing in the 3rd grade that they're also teaching them about the pleasurable parts of their body, like the clitoris or the sensitivity of the vulva. I'm surprised they didn't go into talking about every part of the penis either. But a lot of this is driven by sexual rights and this belief that children are sexual from birth. So let me help you understand the language. Language is powerful. We're all born male or female, and we are born with a biological sex, male or female. So yes, we are born with our reproductive parts. We are born knowing that we're male or female. It does not make us sexual. Now, what I can say is that we are relational from birth. In other words, humanity, and even animals, but humans need relationship. Babies need to be held. They need to be comforted. They need to be loved. They need to be touched gently and in a caring and in loving way. I mean, there's these old studies that we found from, and I think most of you probably heard of them, and that there was an orphanage and that they noticed that, they didn't have enough staff to care for the infants, and the infants who were not touched often actually became ill and did not fare well. They did very poorly. Then they started realizing that if children and babies are touched often because they're relational, they fared better. Their health was better. And so I want you to know that we are not born sexual from birth. That makes it, as it plants a seed as though we should be experiencing sexual pleasure throughout our life. No, that's not how we've been created. Children, if they are stimulated sexually, we know is called sexual abuse, and we call it sexual abuse or a rape of a child because it harms a child. But a child is relational from birth. They need contact with loving people, preferably their families, of course. So I just want to make that clear, is that we're not sexual from birth, but we are relational from birth. But the fact that Planned Parenthood and SIECUS and Amaze.org and Advocates for Youth all believe that we're sexual from birth is exactly why we see that a lesson in the 3rd grade is talking about the clitoris and the vulva and all of that. Now, what's the big deal about mentioning that there's an anus? Well, number one, it's not part of the reproductive system. Number two, the reason that they're bringing up the anus in elementary school is that they want to begin to normalize the anus with the rest of the reproductive system, not because it's part of the reproductive system, but because later on they're going to talk about how anal sex is also normal. And so I believe that that's really the reason why they're introducing it. So they don't just mention, oh, here's a cross-section of the body, and by the way, there's an anus there. It's not part of your reproductive system, but just want to let you know that's what that is. No, they not only show the cross-section, but then they also have handouts that say reproductive parts, and you have to match the words with the definitions or, whatever. And anus is always a part of that. So they're continuing to talk about the anus throughout all of those lessons. Again, I believe it's truly to normalize anal sex in probably 5th grade, 6th grade, to start talking about that. Now, why do they talk about anal sex? Well, one, they want to normalize it. Two, when you talk about risk reduction education, which is what comprehensive sex education is, so all this graphic sex education that you see out there, it has this really, nice sounding label called comprehensive sex education. But what it really is it's using a risk reduction health approach, which means you are engaged in a high risk behavior and we just teach you how to reduce your risk. That is risk reduction. And so in the world of risk reduction, when we talk about STIs and HIV and pregnancy, we're going to talk about all forms of sex and how you can protect yourself from getting a disease or becoming pregnant by using condoms, lubrication, and hormonal contraception. So one of those things is talking about anal sex. So anyway, it does normalize that behavior. And in this case, it's normalizing it in school-age children. And it's putting our children at great risk. Now, all of this really started in the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution wanted to be able to separate sexual intercourse from having children. They wanted the intercourse without having to have the child. Okay, so it's kind of like, I want to eat lots of donuts, but I don't want to gain weight. It just isn't going to happen. So when I taught my son about sex and intercourse once he got a little bit older, I did, of course, tell him that this is how babies are made and what sex is. And so I let him know that in our society, I do believe that sex is best and should be kept for in the context of marriage. But I also mentioned to him, I said, every time someone has sexual intercourse, they also must accept that they might become a mother or a father. Every time you have sexual intercourse, you are accepting the possibility that you will conceive a child and be responsible for that child. That kind of changes the context a little bit, doesn't it? Or your perception of sex. The sexual revolution wants to say sex is for pleasure, and that's it. Hence why they have abortion, and all these other things, because they just want to have it for pleasure. And that's what comprehensive sex education is about as well. It's just about the pleasure. And it's about using condoms and lubrication to hopefully reduce the risk of all this other stuff. But it's really just about the pleasure. In our case, in my case, and what I'm talking about is we must go into sex knowing that you might conceive a child. And if you're having sex outside of marriage, you have to go into sex knowing that you might also get a disease. Okay, it's going to happen. And comprehensive sex education, they know that's going to happen, which is why they're normalizing STIs. SIECUS and different Planned Parenthood, they're all coming out, their sex educators are all coming out saying, everybody gets chlamydia, everybody gets syphilis. Lots of people are living healthy lives living with HIV. We do not want to promote and normalize for people to accept getting a disease. Here we are in the middle of coronavirus, and nobody wants the virus, of course. Well, STIs can lead to sterility. STIs could also lead to you passing them on to your children when you have children, meaning, when the woman gives birth. I mean, there's all kinds of risks and health problems that come with STIs. HIV cannot be cured. And although there are treatments, you do not want to have to live with HIV. This is not to shame or to demean anyone living with HIV or with herpes or any other disease that cannot be cured. But we shouldn't have some kind of public health message that's saying, sure, go get it. It's no big deal. You can handle it. No, it's interesting that they think you can handle a lifelong disease, but you can't handle a child. A child is not a disease. A child is a blessing. So that's really odd. So as parents, I would say, what I told my son is, of course, I set up the expectation for him that sex should be in the context of marriage. I didn't talk about sex as just pleasure or, I really talked to him about how it builds intimacy in a marriage and how beautiful it is. And when I explained it to him, even as young as he was, not that young, he was in elementary school or anything, or maybe he might have been 5th grade actually. But he just said, Mom, that's amazing. That sounds beautiful. It sounded beautiful because I wasn't going into the details of the act. It's the intimacy. That's the point of the sex. So comprehensive sex education, Planned Parenthood, they're not concerned about intimacy. They're just focused on pleasure. Pleasure in every possible way. And I'm not kidding you. Again, do not let your kids listen to this. They're going to talk about sexual pleasure in every possible way, using pornography, using sex toys. Scarleteen is a book that they promote a lot. It talks about horrendous sexual activities that are not safe, not normal, and definitely not to build intimacy with a person. A lot of it is really just objectifying and even dehumanizing each other. So when school-age children are taught to objectify themselves, when they're taught that talking about sexual topics, intimate topics with anybody in the school, with adults, then they're going to think it's normal if someone approaches them outside of the school to talk about sex. They're going to think it's not a big deal if they see pornography. They're going to think it's not a big deal if an adult person on the internet starts talking to them about sexual things. Because why? Well, we've been talking about all kinds of graphic sexual things at school, so it must be okay. So this is why I created It Takes a Family. Parents, you need to take control of this. And I'm not going to just meet you where you're at and leave you there. I want to give you resources. And what would help me to help you is email me, monica@ittakesafamily.org. I want to know what your questions are. I want to know what you need. In my mind, I've been in sex education for so long. I'm like, oh, I guess I can talk about all these things. But the truth is a lot of parents have said, I want to know how to talk to my child about being 16 or becoming a man, becoming a woman, like things that are more in the heart than it is just the body. And I would love to be able to help you with that. So email me and let me know what you'd like to hear. And as I'm building content, I want to build exactly what you're needing. Okay. So I think I got through all of that. So how about some call to action items? I just want you to do your best enjoying your family. I think some of the things that you can do right now at home is definitely get some activity. Some things that I saw parents doing is using masking tape around their house to create obstacles. And so this one family put tape with, made it look like arrows on the floor with pillows and all kinds of things and ottomans, and basically created an obstacle course for their son. And he literally was just doing this obstacle course over and over and over again. So as we're feeling stress about being at home and maybe even a little bit uncertain about what's happening, physical activity can really help your children, and it can really help you too. So getting a little bit active throughout the day is really important. And also you don't have to dismiss if you're concerned about something. Just don't let it become this big monster, that takes over your household, so that's all you're doing is worrying. Instead, we need to just kind of turn it into things that we're thankful for. And I know that sounds kind of trite, but I've actually tried it in the past when things didn't look like there was anything to be thankful for. And I had a coworker say, just start thanking God for everything you have. If you have a roll of toilet paper, thank Him for that. And it works. Being thankful and grateful really works, but you have to practice it. So, and you can make a game of it with your kids if you need to. So I hope that this was helpful and maybe hopefully even a distraction from what you're going through right now. And I'll try to keep you up to date on what's going on with sex education and just some other things that are going around in our nation, and would love to be that person that just interrupts your home every once in a while. So anyway, enjoy your time, I hope. Send me your prayer requests at monica@ittakesafamily.org or private message me on Facebook. Either way, I'd love to hear from you, and I'm praying for you. Okay? See you later. Bye.